The first peoples of Mexico. The first peoples of Mexico arrived thousands of years ago, likely migrating from Asia across the Bering Land Bridge. As they moved south, they adapted to diverse environments, deserts, mountains, and jungles, living as hunter-gatherers who hunted megafauna like mammoths and gathered wild plants. Everything changed around 7000 BCE with the domestication of maize. In areas like Coxcotlan Cave in the Tehuacan Valley, early farmers cultivated teosinte, a wild grass that evolved into corn. Alongside maize, they grew beans, squash, and chili peppers, forming the core of the Mesoamerican diet. Farming allowed nomadic groups to settle in villages. These communities didn't just grow food, they developed spiritual beliefs tied to agriculture. Ceremonies aligned with solstices and stars guided planting seasons. Early astronomers tracked celestial bodies like Venus and even predicted eclipses. Their creativity wasn't limited to farming or stargazing. More than 3,000 years ago, they created rubber balls for ceremonial games, long before the invention of the wheel. These games symbolized cosmic forces, life, and death. Domesticated dogs and turkeys weren't just food sources. They held spiritual meaning and were used in rituals. These early peoples laid the foundation for the rise of powerful Mesoamerican civilizations, leaving behind a legacy in agriculture, astronomy, and cultural tradition. The Olmec civilization. By 1500 BCE, a remarkable culture emerged on Mexico's Gulf Coast. The Olmecs, often called the mother culture of Mesoamerica. Their influence shaped the Maya, Aztecs, and other major civilizations. Olmec society thrived in the tropical lowlands of present-day Veracruz and Tabasco. Major centers like San Lorenzo and La Venta featured complex urban planning, including raised platforms, drainage systems, and ceremonial mounds. These cities were ruled by elites who oversaw labor and religion. La Venta rose after San Lorenzo's decline and became known for its massive earthen pyramid, one of the oldest in the Americas. The Olmecs are most famous for their colossal stone heads, some weighing up to 40 tons. These basalt sculptures likely represent rulers and were transported without wheels or animals, showing incredible organizational power. The Olmecs were intellectual pioneers. They developed one of the earliest hieroglyphic writing systems in Mesoamerica and likely introduced the concept of zero. Their advanced calendars helped guide agricultural and religious life. Spiritually, the Olmecs believed in a universe governed by powerful natural forces. The jaguar, often depicted as a human-animal hybrid, symbolized transformation and shamanic power. Bloodletting rituals were practiced to maintain cosmic order. They were also the first known people to use cacao, drinking chocolate in sacred ceremonies as early as 1900 BCE. And like earlier peoples, they crafted rubber balls from native latex trees for ritual ball games that symbolized cosmic battles. By 400 BCE, the Olmecs mysteriously declined, possibly due to environmental change or internal conflict. Yet their cultural DNA spread across the region, influencing the Zapotecs, Maya, and Aztecs. The Olmecs didn't build empires, but their ideas in religion, art, agriculture, and technology shaped the course of Mesoamerican civilization. Teotihuacan and the Zapotecs. In the Valley of Mexico, around 100 BCE, a city began to rise, Teotihuacan. By 500 CE, it had become the largest city in the Americas, home to more than 100,000 people. Its size and complexity rivaled those of ancient Rome and Constantinople. Towering structures like the Pyramid of the Sun, Pyramid of the Moon, and the Avenue of the Dead dominated the city, carefully aligned with celestial events. These weren't just impressive, they were deeply spiritual, connecting the heavens with the earth. Teotihuacan was more than just a religious or ceremonial hub. It was a vibrant cosmopolitan center, home to people from across Mesoamerica, including regions as far as the Gulf Coast and Maya lands. These communities thrived thanks to a vast trade network that exchanged obsidian, pottery, textiles, jade, and cacao. The city's urban planning was extraordinary, Its streets followed a precise grid, and large residential complexes housed thousands. It was a city built on order, balance, and innovation. Although it began to decline around the 7th or 8th century CE, Teotihuacan's legacy endured, leaving behind art, architecture, and traditions that influenced Mesoamerica for centuries. At the same time, in what is now Oaxaca, the Zapotec civilization was flourishing. Their hilltop capital, Monte Alban, rose around 500 BCE and became one of the longest-lasting city-states in the region. The Zapotecs created Mesoamerica's earliest known writing system, using glyphs to record history and religious practices. They also developed a unique calendar that reflected their deep understanding of time and ritual. Monte Alban's tombs and plazas reveal a hierarchical society led by an elite class. Like Teotihuacan, the Zapotecs built temples and ball courts, where games symbolized cosmic struggles. Their cities, built high above the valley floor, linked their spiritual beliefs to the heavens. Despite Teotihuacan's decline, its cultural and architectural influence spread, even in its Zapotec territory and as far as modern-day Guatemala. New studies suggest the people of Teotihuacan created artificial lakes and used obsidian tools, possibly for advanced medical practices. And far from the gray ruins we see today, their pyramids were once painted in vivid reds, yellows, and blues, with murals of feathered serpents and mythical creatures. The Maya civilization. The Maya flourished in the dense jungles and highlands of what is now southern Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, and parts of Honduras. Their story began around 2000 BCE with small farming communities, but by the Classic period, 250 to 900 CE, they had developed into one of the most advanced civilizations of the ancient world. City-states like Tikal, Palenque, Copan, and Calakmul became political, economic, and religious centers. Their pyramids and palaces stood tall as symbols of Maya ingenuity and ambition. One of the Maya's greatest achievements was their writing system, a complex script of over 1,000 glyphs used to record history, royal lineage, and sacred rituals. This writing appeared on stone monuments, ceramics, and bark paper books. Although most of their books were destroyed during colonization, a few, like the Dresden Codex, survive today, preserving their knowledge of astronomy and ceremony. Their understanding of mathematics and astronomy was equally advanced. The Maya were among the first to use zero, and they built two interlocking calendars, a 260-day ritual calendar and a 365-day solar calendar. Together, these formed a 52-year cycle, similar to a century. Their solar year calculation was off by just 17 seconds, astonishing for its time. They also tracked Venus and other celestial bodies with precision, influencing the timing of rituals and even wars. Maya rulers were seen as divine intermediaries between humans and gods. Bloodletting rituals, offering blood from the tongue or earlobe, were common, as were human sacrifices, especially to gods like Chuk, Rain, and Kukulkan, feathered serpent. These acts were part of a cosmic balance, giving life to sustain the universe. Unlike centralized empires, the Maya were a network of independent city-states. Some, like Tikal and Calakmul, became rivals, battling for influence and shaping the political map of the region. Yet, despite their independence, the Maya shared a common culture, expressed through language, religion, and art. The classic Maya civilization began to decline in the 9th century, likely due to drought, warfare, and overpopulation. But the Maya people didn't vanish. They adapted. Cities like Chichen Itza and Uxmal thrived into the post-classic period, even surviving until the Spanish conquest. Today, millions of Maya descendants still speak their native languages and maintain their traditions. The ruins of their cities, the complexity of their writing, and their scientific achievements stand as powerful reminders of a civilization that continues to shape our understanding of the ancient world. The Toltecs and the rise of the Aztecs. After the fall of Teotihuacan, the Toltecs rose to power around 900 CE. establishing their capital at Tula. Known for their artistry, military strength, and imposing Atlantean warrior columns, the Toltecs became cultural icons across Mesoamerica. Their blend of religion and militarism, especially their worship of Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god, deeply influenced later civilizations. The Aztecs, or Mexica, revered the Toltecs as legendary ancestors. Following divine signs, they founded Tenochtitlan in 1325 on Lake Texcoco. Against all odds, they transformed this swampy island into a breathtaking city of temples, canals, and chinampas, floating gardens that revolutionized agriculture. Though the term Aztec is widely used, they called themselves Mexica, a name rooted in their identity. Over the next 2 centuries, they would forge a powerful empire built on Toltec ideals, divine destiny, and relentless ambition. Mesoamerican religion and worldview. Mesoamerican cultures saw the world as cyclical, constantly destroyed and reborn. They believed humanity owed a cosmic debt to the gods, who had sacrificed themselves to create the world. Human blood, viewed as sacred life force, was central to religious rituals. Sacrifice was a sacred duty. The sun god Huitzilopochtli required captives to fuel the sun. Tlaloc, god of rain, demanded child offerings to bring life-giving water. While shocking to modern views, these acts symbolized cosmic balance and reciprocity with the gods. Deities like Quetzalcoatl, wisdom and renewal, and Tezcatlipoca, war and chaos, reflected the dual nature of existence. The famous Mesoamerican ball game, more than a sport, acted as a ritual reenactment of cosmic battles, with players sometimes sacrificed in honor of the gods. 2 calendars, the 260-day ritual calendar and 365-day solar calendar, guided all aspects of life, from planting to warfare. Massive temples aligned with celestial events served as sacred centers of worship and astronomical observation. The birth of New Spain. In 1521, after the fall of Tenochtitlan, the Spanish swiftly transformed the former Aztec capital into Mexico City, the heart of a new empire, New Spain. What was once a vibrant city of canals and temples became the administrative and cultural center of Spain's vast colonial holdings in the Americas. Within decades, Mexico City rivaled and even surpassed many European cities in size and infrastructure. Its location and resources made it one of the crown jewels of the Spanish Empire. Governance shifted from the personal ambitions of Hernán Cortés to a centralized system run by a viceroy, appointed directly by the Spanish king. This created a rigid colonial hierarchy. Spanish-born elites sat at the top, while indigenous peoples, often displaced and exploited, occupied the lowest rungs. Yet conquest didn't completely erase the past. Spanish and indigenous cultures fused, creating a unique colonial identity. The Templo Mayor, once the heart of Aztec religious life, was buried beneath colonial Mexico City, replaced by a grand cathedral. This layering of old and new became symbolic of the entire colonial experience: destruction, survival, and transformation. Spain's primary goal was resource extraction. The encomienda system granted Spanish settlers control over land and indigenous labor under the guise of protection and religious instruction. While some indigenous elites were co-opted into the system, many communities were marginalized or enslaved. The discovery of silver in Zacatecas and Guanajuato turned New Spain into a global economic powerhouse, fueling Spain's ambitions across Europe. But New Spain was more than just an economic engine. It became a global crossroads. Through the Manila galleon trade, goods like Chinese silk, porcelain, and spices flowed into Mexico, while silver from New Spain circulated back across the Pacific. This trade route connected Asia, the Americas, and Europe, making New Spain a key player in the world's first global economy. Mexico City quickly emerged as a center of education, culture, and governance. With universities, printing presses, and public services, it symbolized Spain's efforts to transplant European civilization to the New World. Yet indigenous traditions endured, blending with Spanish customs in everything from cuisine and festivals to religion and art. Colonial society and the casta system. In colonial Mexico, society was strictly organized through a racial hierarchy known as the casta system. At the top were the peninsulars, Spaniards born in Spain, who held top roles in government, church, and military. Beneath them were the criollos, American-born Spaniards, wealthy but politically limited due to their birth. Below them, mestizos, mixed European and indigenous heritage, and mulattoes, European and African descent, filled the working class. At the bottom were indigenous peoples and enslaved Africans, who faced systemic discrimination and were often forced into unpaid labor under systems like the encomienda. This social order was backed by colonial laws and even reflected in artwork such as casta paintings, which categorized people by racial mix in bizarre detail. While this system was designed to divide and control, over time it began to break down. Mestizos grew in number and influence, and some wealthy mixed-race individuals even purchased legal reclassification, showing how status could sometimes outweigh race. Indigenous resistance and cultural survival. Despite the Spanish conquest, indigenous resistance never truly ceased. Rebellions like the Mixton War and the Pueblo Revolt of 1680 demonstrated open defiance, while quieter forms of resistance took place in courtrooms. Indigenous leaders became adept at using Spanish law to protect land rights and reduce tributes, slowing colonial control. Many indigenous communities blended pre-Hispanic governance with colonial structures, using local councils to preserve traditions. They maintained their languages, Nahuatl, Maya, Mixtec, and adapted European writing to record their own histories. Spiritual resistance also persisted. While Catholicism was imposed, indigenous beliefs were not erased. Instead, many native gods and rituals were reimagined within Christian practices. Festivals like Day of the Dead show this blending of faiths, honoring ancestors while outwardly following Catholic tradition. The Grito de Dolores and the Mexican War of Independence. In the early hours of September 16, 1810, in the small town of Dolores, a priest named Miguel Hidalgo y Costilla rang his church bell, summoning the townspeople. In a fiery call to action, now known as the Grito de Dolores, he urged the people to rise up against Spanish colonial rule. Though the exact words are lost to history, Hidalgo invoked the Virgin of Guadalupe as a symbol of unity, faith, and resistance. Hidalgo's call resonated across Mexico. Indigenous peoples, mestizos, and even some Creoles rallied behind him. Though his followers were poorly armed and lacked military training, their anger over land injustices, high taxes, and political oppression fueled a growing rebellion. The insurgents, flying banners of the Virgin of Guadalupe, quickly captured towns, alarming colonial authorities. However, the movement was unstructured. Many followed Hidalgo for personal or religious reasons rather than a clear political ideology. This lack of cohesion weakened the rebellion. By early 1811, Hidalgo was captured and executed. His head was displayed publicly as a warning to others. Morelos gave the movement structure and purpose, but his ideas proved too extreme for some allies. In 1815, he was captured and executed, and the rebellion again lost central leadership. Guerrilla leaders like Vicente Guerrero continued to fight in remote regions, keeping the dream of independence alive despite setbacks and internal divisions. Meanwhile, political turmoil in Spain, including the brief adoption of a liberal constitution and the return to absolutism, further weakened Spanish control over its colonies. A surprising turning point came in 1820 when Agustín de Iturbide, a conservative royalist general, defected. Seeking to maintain order and protect elite interests, he joined forces with Guerrero. Together, they created the Plan of Iguala, which promised Mexican independence, unity between peninsulars and criollos, and Catholicism as the national religion. This unexpected alliance shifted the balance of power. By 1821, Spain, exhausted by war and revolution, was unable to resist. The Treaty of Córdoba officially recognized Mexico's independence. Ironically, Mexico's independence was achieved not by radical reformers, but through compromise with royalists. Iturbide soon declared himself emperor, and the deeper social reforms championed by Morelos were largely shelved. True equality remained out of reach. The First Mexican Empire and the struggle for a republic. In 1821, after gaining independence from Spain, Mexico faced the enormous task of building a new nation. Instead of forming a republic, it unexpectedly became a monarchy. Agustín de Iturbide, a former royalist general turned independence hero, crowned himself Emperor Agustín I in 1822. Inspired by European monarchies, he believed a royal figure would unify Mexico's deeply divided society. However, his empire lacked political foundations, the economy was in ruins after 11 years of war, and political divisions ran deep. Federalists wanted a decentralized democratic system, while monarchists pushed for a strong central rule. The vast territory, including parts of Central America, was difficult to govern. By 1823, Central American provinces seceded, forming their own republic. Iturbide made matters worse by dissolving Congress and ruling autocratically, alienating both liberals and conservatives. His downfall came quickly. After only 18 months, he abdicated and went into exile. When he returned in 1824, he was arrested and executed. His empire became one of the shortest-lived monarchies in history. The Reform Era and La Reforma. In the wake of Mexico's defeat in the U.S.-Mexican War and the loss of over half its territory, many Mexicans believed the country's problems ran deeper than military weakness. To reformers, this national humiliation exposed a broken system, a corrupt, colonial-style society dominated by elite interests, the Catholic Church, and the military. It was time for radical change. Leading the charge was Benito Juárez, a Zapotec from Oaxaca. His rise from poverty to national leadership symbolized a new vision of Mexico, one where indigenous people had a voice in shaping the nation. Juárez and a new generation of liberals sought to build a modern, democratic country based on equality, secularism, and the rule of law. This movement, known as La Reforma, began in the 1850s. Its aim was to dismantle the traditional centers of power. The ley Juárez stripped the clergy and military of their special legal privileges, making all citizens equal under the law. Soon after, the ley Lerdo targeted the church's vast landholdings. These lands, along with communal indigenous lands, were seized and sold, intended to encourage private property and economic modernization. But in practice, wealthy elites snapped up most of the land, pushing many rural peasants further into poverty. The reforms reached their peak with the Constitution of 1857, which enshrined civil liberties, freedom of speech, secular public education, and most controversially, a total separation of church and state. To the reformers, this marked Mexico's entry into the modern world. But to many others, especially rural Catholics and conservatives, it felt like an attack on tradition and faith. This ideological divide exploded into open conflict. From 1857 to 1861, Mexico was engulfed in the Reform War, also known as the War of the 3 Years, a brutal civil conflict between the liberal government and conservative forces. Towns were destroyed, the economy collapsed, and thousands died. In the end, the liberals emerged victorious, and Benito Juárez became president. On paper, the reforms were secured. But in reality, the country remained deeply divided. Revolutionary leaders, Zapata, Villa, Carranza. The Mexican Revolution fractured into competing factions, each led by a figure representing a different vision for the nation. 3 of the most iconic leaders, Emiliano Zapata, Pancho Villa, and Venustiano Carranza, each commanded large followings, but their conflicting goals turned allies into rivals and prolonged the chaos of the revolution. Emiliano Zapata rose as the voice of the agrarian South. A farmer from Morelos, he fought for indigenous and rural communities devastated by the hacienda system. His rallying cry, Tierra y Libertad, land and freedom, captured his unwavering focus on land reform. In 1911, disillusioned with the lack of progress, Zapata issued the Plan de Ayala, a bold manifesto demanding land redistribution. Though he struggled with literacy, Zapata dictated some of the revolution's most powerful documents, becoming a lasting symbol of social justice. In the North, Pancho Villa followed a different path. Born into poverty and once a bandit, he transformed into a revolutionary leader, commanding the Division of the North, an army of cowboys, miners, and laborers. Known for guerrilla warfare tactics and charismatic leadership, Villa also implemented social reforms in territories under his control. The Constitution of 1917 and post-revolution reforms. Amid continued fighting, Carranza convened a constitutional convention in Querétaro, resulting in the Constitution of 1917, a groundbreaking document embedding the revolution's ideals into law. It guaranteed secular education, workers' rights, and limited church power, becoming one of the most progressive constitutions of its time. Article 27 declared land and natural resources property of the nation, laying the foundation for land redistribution and national sovereignty. Article 123 secured labor rights, an 8-hour workday, the right to strike, and protection from unjust dismissal. Mexico's constitution was the first in the world to enshrine social rights, even before Germany's Weimar Constitution. Its influence reached beyond Mexico, inspiring reforms globally, including in Roosevelt's New Deal. However, Carranza hesitated to fully implement these reforms, especially land redistribution. Frustration mounted, and he was overthrown and killed in 1920. His successor, Álvaro Obregón, began putting the Constitution into action, especially in education and land reform. José Vasconcelos, as education minister, expanded rural education and literacy. The rise of the PRI and state control. In 1929, Plutarco Elias Calles founded the National Revolutionary Party, PNR, to unify Mexico after years of turmoil. It evolved into the Institutional Revolutionary Party, PRI, in 1946, becoming the dominant force in Mexican politics for the next 71 years. The PRI absorbed former enemies, unions, and intellectuals, ensuring stability through co-optation rather than suppression. Though elections continued, power stayed within the PRI through a system of appointed successors and electoral manipulation. Under the PRI, Mexico experienced political stability, avoiding the coups that plagued other Latin American countries. The military was brought into the political system, ensuring loyalty without direct interference in governance. One of the most transformative PRI presidents was Lázaro Cárdenas, 1934 to 1940. He redistributed millions of acres through the ejido system and nationalized the oil industry in 1938, forming Pemex and asserting national control over resources. 1968 and the Mexican student movement. In the summer of 1968, while youth-led protests swept cities from Paris to Chicago, Mexico experienced its own wave of resistance. At the heart of it were students from the National Autonomous University of Mexico, UNAM, and the National Polytechnic Institute, IPN. What started as protests for university autonomy quickly grew into a powerful mass movement demanding democracy, freedom of expression, an end to police brutality, and relief from decades of authoritarian rule under the PRI. This wasn't just a student issue. It was a direct challenge to the PRI's decades-long control over Mexican society. Tensions rose even higher as Mexico prepared to host the 1968 Summer Olympics, the first ever held in Latin America. The government aimed to use the Games to promote a modern, peaceful image to the world. But behind the scenes, dissent was being crushed. Demonstrations were routinely met with violent repression. Police and military forces used tear gas, beatings, and arrests to silence protesters. The government framed the students as agitators, trying to discredit the movement, but the momentum only grew. That evening, the government launched a brutal and coordinated attack. Snipers, stationed on rooftops, opened fire on the crowd. Panic erupted. People ran in every direction as gunfire filled the square. Hundreds were killed, though the exact number remains unknown. Many were wounded, arrested, or disappeared without a trace. In the aftermath, the PRI government denied responsibility. Officials claimed provocateurs started the violence. For years, survivors were silenced and families received no answers. But declassified military documents later revealed the truth. The massacre was planned and executed by the state to eliminate dissent before the global spotlight of the Olympics. The Tlatelolco massacre shattered the illusion of a peaceful, benevolent government. It exposed the PRI's reliance on violence and repression to maintain control. Rather than ending the student movement, the massacre became a rallying cry for future generations. To this day, October 2nd is remembered with protests and vigils across Mexico. The phrase "2 de octubre no se olvida," October 2nd, is not forgotten, echoes as a reminder of those who died and a warning against state brutality.